Bari Weiss on her Substack has a report written by Katie Herzog that's it's really a must-read, and it's about the infiltration of gender theory into medical school. So here's a little bit of it. So it says, during a recent endocrinology course at a top medical school in the University of California system, a professor stopped mid-lecture to apologize for something he'd said at the beginning of the class. Quote, "I don't want you to think that I'm in any way trying to imply anything, and if you can summon some generosity to forgive me, I would really appreciate it," the physician says in a recording provided by a student in the class, who we'll call Lauren. "Again, I'm very sorry for that. It was certainly not my intention to offend anyone. The worst thing that I could do as a human being is be offensive." His offense, using the term pregnant woman. Okay, this is in medical school. We're going to go right past the statement, the worst thing I can do as a human being is be offensive. How revealing is that? Someone who believes that the worst thing you can do, it's not murder, it's not rape. The worst thing, it's not pedophilia. No, the worst thing is to offend someone with your words. And he really believes that. Quote, "I said when a woman is pregnant, which implies that only women can get pregnant, and I most sincerely apologize to all of you." It wasn't the first time that Lauren had heard an instructor apologize for using language that, to most Americans, would seem utterly inoffensive. Words like male and female. Why would medical school professors apologize for referring to a patient's biological sex? Because, Lauren explains, in the context of her medical school, acknowledging biological sex can be considered transphobic. When sex is acknowledged by our instructors, it's sometimes portrayed as a social construct, not a biological reality. In a lecture on transgender health, an instructor declared, "Biological sex, sexual orientation, and gender are all constructs. These are all constructs that we have created." I can't read. It's worth going to Bari Weiss' Substack, finding that and reading the whole report. This is bone-chilling stuff. Not surprising. We knew it was going to get to this. Gender theory had made its inroads into grade school, into undergraduate courses, and it was only a matter of time before it would fully intrude into medical school. Of course, the problem, it's a pretty significant one, is that you cannot do medicine if you don't recognize biological reality. That is the foundation of medicine, is human biology and understanding human biology. You cannot be a doctor who doesn't understand human biology, because this is what you're working with. This is what you're trying to treat. So if you don't understand it, or are not going to allow yourself to acknowledge it, then medicine ceases to exist. We also know that this was inevitable. We were always going to get to this point. Once we allowed this artificial bifurcation of sex and gender. Gender, up until the 1950s and 1960s, nobody talked about human beings having a gender. There was no need for the term. There still is no need for it. We don't need to talk about that. You have a sex, and that's what you have. There's no need to go any further than that. And we have the words masculinity and femininity to talk about the way that men and women typically act and the way that they interact with the world. So we already have those terms. And if you had a man who acts in a more feminine way, then you could just say that. You don't need to talk about, well, his gender, his sex is male, but his gender is female because he acts in a feminine way. Adding this extra label into it only confuses matters intentionally. But the gender theory proponents, the gender theory cultists, really, for decades, after taking gender from the realm of language, which is where it had been before, words had gender. Okay, obviously you can't talk about a word having a biological sex, but a word can have gendered language, which is now offensive. So he took that out of the realm of language, started applying it to people, and for decades we were told, it's two different things. You have your biological sex and you have your gender. Lots of people went along with that. That became a kind of this mainstream understanding that people had, even though it really didn't make any sense. And now what we're watching over the last couple of years, and it is a very significant development, and it was also entirely inevitable, it was always going to go this way. We're watching that distinction once again collapse. Now it's the same thing. Sex and gender once again are the same thing. Except that now, really, when we talk about the distinction being collapsed, we've just erased biological sex. And now there is only gender. And you can use sex to refer to gender, but that's all that really is there. All there is the human construct. Something to keep in mind, going forward when you go to the doctor. You might want to do a quick quiz before deciding who your primary care physician is going to be. This might be an important thing to do. They'll do a checkup with you. They'll do a kind of a preliminary physical. Well, you might want to do a preliminary checkup with them and ask them a few questions like, hey, doc, by the way, can a man get pregnant? If they say yes to that, if they say anything but no, go find another doctor. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.